Welcome back to the Imperfectionist Podcast. My name is David Rendall, and last week we talked about Jesse Cole from the Savannah Bananas. I got to introduce him at an event where I was the MC, and we talked about Dr. Phil and how they were encouraging people to be different, to stand out. So I thought we'd build on that a little bit this week. So I'm wearing my Party Animals gear. Now you might say, what does that have to do with the Savannah Bananas? So the Savannah Bananas are like the minor league baseball version, or probably it would be better to say the baseball version of the Harlem Globetrotters. So they don't play a lot of different teams. They mainly play one team, and it's kind of like their team as well, just with a different name. So they're called the Party Animals, and they wear pink. So obviously I am a big fan. And if you're watching this, I've got my new Party Animals hat, which is pink and has a cool monkey with a banana on his head. And I got my cool new Party Animals shirt. And that's sort of like we talked about last week, doing the opposite, right? I'm not cheering for the Savannah Bananas. I'm cheering for their opponents because they wear a color that I like better. And since our last episode, Jesse left the event that we were at, Jesse Cole, the owner and founder of the Savannah Bananas, and then he sold out the Clemson Tigers stadium called Death Valley in South Carolina. 81,000 people came to his minor league baseball game. That's more people than go to major league baseball games. Most major league stadiums don't even hold 81,000 people. College football stadiums are some of the biggest in the country, and Clemson is certainly one of the biggest and the best, and he sold out the entire place for the Savannah Bananas. So that tells you the level of success that he's having doing the things that we talked about last week, doing things that make him different. But I thought we'd talk a little bit this week about the value of being different. In my book, The Freak Factor, there's a whole section on what makes you rare, what makes you unique, and a whole series of explanations of the reasons that being different is valuable. And I think I take that for granted sometimes, but I wanted to discuss that a little bit this week because I do think there is a certain narrative that goes around of why would you want to be different? Why wouldn't you want to be normal? Normal's good. Different is oftentimes bad or problematic or difficult or something like that. And a lot of times, even sometimes when I ask people about something unique about them or something like that, they say, well, it turns out I'm actually pretty normal. And we'll talk about that on a separate podcast, how there is really no such thing as normal. There's no one who's the average height and the average weight and makes the average amount of money and has the average family size and was born in the month where the average person is, and just on and on. There's no real way. The weirdest person on earth would be a person who was that average. So, but we'll get to that in a different one. So today what I want to focus on is the value of, and we'll see how far we get, the value of being different. And the first thing is that it makes you rare instead of ordinary. So that's the question I want to start with for you, is what makes you rare, right? What makes you rare? Have you really thought about that? Do you know what ordinary looks like? Do you know what average looks like? Do you know what normal looks like? And do you know the situations in which you're different from that? Are you taller than normal? Are you smaller than normal? Are you stronger than normal? Are you more athletic than normal? Are you smarter than normal? What is it about you that makes you unique? And sometimes even within things like height, there's other things that we don't notice. So for example, one of the important things in basketball is wingspan, and professional basketball players have much longer wingspans than they would normally have for the height that they have. In other words, their arms are longer than normal in a body that's already taller than normal, but arms are usually somewhat proportionate to your height. So I'm 6'6", and my wingspan should be just about 6'6". But for a basketball player who's 6'6", sometimes their wingspan is 7 feet. Victor Wembanyama, who is a newer basketball player in the NBA from France and plays for the San Antonio Spurs, at least in 2025, is 7'4" or something like that, which is already outrageous, but his wingspan is 8 feet. Right, which is 8 inches longer than you would expect for someone of that height. And so his arms are longer than normal. So even hidden within, so for me, I'm 6'6", and my legs are longer than normal. So I'm mostly legs. There's other people who are my same height, but their upper body is longer than normal. And then their legs are a little shorter than normal for a person of their height. I met a guy a couple weeks ago who was 6 feet tall, which isn't short. But he has a size 14 shoe. So his feet are bigger than normal than you would expect for someone of that height. My feet are smaller than normal for a person of my height because at 6'6", I should wear larger than a 12, at least if I had the normal shoe size of the average shoe size of a person who was 6'6". So those seem small or seem trivial, but it's worth to start asking yourself what makes you different, what makes you rare, because rare is more valuable than ordinary. So let's start with that. Why is it good to be different? It's because rare is more valuable than ordinary. So let's give a very obvious example of that. So if I were to offer you a cup of salt, 1 cup, one American imperial measurement, cooking measurement cup size cup of salt. If I were to offer you a cup of salt or a cup of diamonds, which would you take? And the answer is that you would take the diamonds. Obviously, you would take the diamonds. They're far more valuable than the salt. But we get our word salary from salt because salt used to be so valuable that people actually gave it to other people as money. It was incredibly valuable. And the reason that it was valuable was because it was so rare. It was hard to find, hard to get, hard to mine. And so it was very, very valuable. It's also very, very useful. But this is important. It's still very, very, very useful, and yet it's not nearly as valuable. And why? Because it's not rare anymore. It's incredibly common. It's incredibly ordinary, right? So the scarcity is what changed, but salt is essential for life. A lot of people think, oh, I got dehydrated. I need more water. You do need water, but you mostly need salt. You need that salt in order to live. Salt is crucial for a lot of things, including just life itself, salt and other electrolytes. And yet it's not valuable because it's so common. It's so easy to get. It's so easy to find. It's so easy to manufacture. And so diamonds are worth far more, even though they're practically useless. We're not talking about diamond tipped saw blades and things like that. Those are useful, but most of diamonds are just used for jewelry. And that has a use, but it's not crucial. It's not essential for life. So something that's essential for life isn't very valuable because it's so ordinary, and something that isn't essential for life at all is incredibly valuable because it's rare, right? And so if you want to understand why different is so valuable, it starts with that fundamental understanding that normal, that ordinary isn't very valuable, precisely because it isn't rare, it isn't unusual. We value things more when they're rare and when they're unusual. And so I think it's worth looking at your life, looking at your personality, which we've talked about a lot, looking at your characteristics, but also looking at your features, what makes you rare. So one of the reasons I was able to get a college scholarship was because when I graduated from high school, I was 6'4". And that helped me to have an advantage in basketball. Now, there were a lot of other things about me that weren't advantageous in basketball. I was incredibly skinny. I've always been incredibly skinny. When I graduated from high school, I was 6'4" and weighed 145 pounds. That's not a good body for basketball. I was tall, good, skinny, not good, right? So I was weird in two different ways. I was weird by being taller than the average person, but I was also weird by being thinner than the average person for my height. And that thinness is not an advantage in basketball. If you watch even college basketball players at the Division I level, they're very big, very muscular, very strong. And if they're not, they're incredibly tall, like Victor Wembanyama or Bol Bol or something like that, Taco Fall. And so their extreme height makes up for how thin they are. But I was too thin to play at a high level in college because I was thinner than normal. So I had an advantage in a certain amount of rarity, but also a disadvantage in a certain other kind. But it was an advantage enough to help me make some money, to help me get a scholarship to pay for college. If you can take advantage of the things that make you unique, even if you didn't earn them or even if you didn't choose them, that's the value of uniqueness. That's the value of being different. That's the value of being rare. But if we deny that those things are there, or we wish they weren't there, or we pretend they're not there, or we don't think they're good or valuable at all, then we miss out on that opportunity to get the payoff that comes from uniqueness. So this is an incredibly important question to ask, but not only ask, but to keep asking about yourself, even when it seems like the differences might not matter that much. So I'm now 6'6", which is 99.9th percentile for height, which means only 0.1% of the world's population is taller than me, meaning that my height is very, very, very rare. When people see me, most people notice that because they don't see people as tall as me very often. I don't see people as tall as me very often. It's unusual when it happens and kind of a little bit cool. And we've got a little tall guy club that we kind of feel like we're a part of because it doesn't happen to either one of us very often to see somebody that tall. So, and there's all sorts of advantages that come with being tall. With studies show that we pay tall people more than we pay smaller people for the same work. We vote for taller people in elections. We think taller people are smarter than they actually are, and so there's a lot of payoffs to being taller. So there's an advantage to the uniqueness that comes with being tall, and I try to notice that, remember that, and try to take advantage of that if possible to live a better, happier, more successful life. So, but let's talk about some other things. There's a bunch of things about me that are rare, and I've kind of kept track of these over the years. I've broken many more bones than normal. So I've broken my tibia and my fibula on my left leg in a basketball accident. I've broken my left forearm in half and broken both the radius and the ulna. I've been hit by a truck and had my left elbow broken. I think specifically my lateral condyle was sheared off and they had to screw my elbow back together. I've broken my right shoulder, including a piece of my collarbone. I've broken a stress fracture in my right foot. It is not normal to break that many bones, but I'm also more active than normal. So it's not normal to, for example, run a marathon. And I've run many marathons, including marathons at the end of Ironman triathlons. And I've run ultra marathons, including an ultra marathon of 100 miles. That isn't normal. I ran 7 marathons in 7 days in and around my home. That isn't normal. So I'm more active than normal, which led to me being more injured than normal because I'm doing the kinds of things that can get you hurt more often than regular people are. In fact, 3 of my biggest injuries happened. Let's see. 4 of them happened while exercising, right? Playing basketball, broke my leg. Riding my bike for Ironman training and got attacked by dogs, broke my right shoulder. And I broke my foot in a stress fracture because of a running injury. So my activity level is directly linked to my injury level. Now you say, Dave, what's the value in, being unique in how many times you've broken bones? I don't know that there's specific value in that. What I'm saying is there's value in uniqueness. And so there's value in pinpointing all of the things that make you unique. Part of the value is it leads to great stories and people like to hear about it. And I actually have a pretty funny story that turns into a lesson about breaking my left arm. But so it's just the idea that it's good to be in the habit of acknowledging and actually seeking out and discovering, noticing, being aware of. One of the biggest starting points in the Freak Factor book, which I have right here, in this process of valuing your uniqueness and understanding your strengths and weaknesses is just awareness. Do you know what your strengths and weaknesses are? Do you understand yourself as a person? Do you have an accurate sense of who you are? And part of that is not shying away from or being ashamed of or trying to hide your uniqueness because you recognize the value and actually want to flaunt it, want to show it off, want to be unapologetic about it, are proud of it, and can communicate it to others when you're looking for a career, when you're looking to build a business. That uniqueness and your ability to be confident in that uniqueness and share it effectively with others, that's going to be powerful. So over time, I've learned a lot of unique things about me. My left arm doesn't supinate, which is the way you would turn your hand over to reach out and sort of ask somebody for money. Or the way you'd get something at the drive-through, which I have a funny story about in my presentation, because when I broke my left arm as a child, they didn't quite put it back together right. And that affected all sorts of things. I didn't realize my ability to swing a baseball bat properly. It still causes me to slice the ball in golf because I can't rotate my arms and wrists through like most people would, which again, that's the reason to understand uniqueness, is because when I realized that, that helped explain some things that I thought, what am I doing wrong? Why isn't this working? It's because I had something wrong with me that made the normal way of playing golf, the normal way of swinging a baseball bat, not effective for me. And so I have to sort of adjust the way that I do things when I swim, because my left arm doesn't extend fully because of the damage to my elbow. And when I swim in Ironmans, I have to look and see where I am more often. It's called sighting, because I don't swim as straight as a person with a normal body would, because my right shoulder is damaged and my left elbow doesn't work right. And so I don't swim naturally straight the way a regular person would. And so understanding your uniqueness then helps you make adjustments or make decisions in the way that you live your life, in a way that denying them or failing to understand them doesn't. So breaking bones is another uniqueness. But also my thumbs are weird. I didn't realize this for a long time, but it's called bilateral brachydactyly. And my daughter has it as well, where basically our thumbs look like a big toe. They're very short and they're very fat compared to what a normal hand for a person of our height, especially because my daughter's 5'10", I'm 6'6", and our thumb is sort of the size of a person, much smaller, and it's also fatter and just it has a flat end to it. Again, I can't explain it perfectly. You could Google it, but it looks like a big toe. I never knew that was weird because I don't spend a lot of time looking at other people's thumbs, but I was watching a crime show and it came up about how that was weird and unique, and they wrote the name, they said the name of it, and I looked it up after they explained it, and sure enough, I have that, and my middle daughter has that, and my oldest and youngest daughters don't have that, and my wife doesn't have that. So my thumbs are weird. I have something called Morton's toe, which about 20 something percent of the population has. And you can look and see if you have Morton's toe as well. Morton's toe is when your second toe, not your big toe, but the next toe over from the big toe, is longer than and sticks out farther than the big toe does. Sort of like if your foot is giving people the finger. And this one really confused me for a long time because, again, I don't make a habit of looking at other people's feet. And as a child, I had no idea what other people's toes looked like. But when I was a kid, you still went to a shoe store and there was a shoe store salesperson who was there, and they'd measure your foot on these little things. And then they would pick your shoe size, but they would measure my foot based on the end of my big toe, even though my other toe clearly went out past that, because that's what they were trained to do. And then they'd put my foot in the shoe and then they'd press down in front of my big toe to see if there was enough room, even though there was another toe going past that point. And I always just didn't understand why they were doing it that way. And that's because the majority of people, normal people, their biggest toe is their fattest toe, but also their longest toe. And so that's the way to make shoes fit comfortably. It's so much of an issue that there's special rock climbing shoes for people with Morton's toe, because rock climbing shoes need to be really tight fitting towards the end of your foot. And a normal rock climbing shoe would be incredibly uncomfortable and painful for a person with Morton's toe, which is another example of making an adjustment based on uniqueness. That if you're not aware of that uniqueness, or you assume that your way is normal or everyone's like that, that's actually a mistake and can lead to a lot of pain, difficulty, and frustration. So that's another example of something that's unique about me. And again, what I'd like you to do is, some of you just discovered you had Morton's toe. Some of you are going to discover that you have brachydactyly, maybe bilateral. Bilateral just means on both thumbs. There's also a variety of forms of brachydactyly that can affect other fingers as well. And what you find out is maybe your fingers aren't as normal as you thought. And that's, again, just a helpful thing in general for accepting, which we've talked about in the last couple of episodes, accepting and appreciating people who are different, is to realize that you're different too, that you're not the normal one. Everyone isn't like you and shouldn't be like you, but you're also not the normal one either. You're not the standard against which everyone is comparing themselves to. So it's helpful to understand your own uniqueness when it comes to accepting others as well, and not seeing difference as being wrong. And that tends to be something that we do. We tend to see being different as something that's wrong instead of something that's good, which is, again, why I do this one on the value of difference. And I think this is going to be a multi-part series where we kind of go through piece by piece and talk about that. So one of the reasons that the Savannah Bananas are selling out their games and being able to sell out college football stadiums and baseball stadiums and professional football stadiums is because there are really no other baseball teams doing what the Savannah Bananas do. So they're incredibly rare, and then there aren't that many games to go see them at. And so what they do is rare, and the opportunity to see them do it is rare, and that drives up the value of what they're doing and enables them to be very, very successful in doing that. I'm wearing their stuff because it's rare to have pink baseball gear. Now, regular minor league teams, I'll give them some credit, have started changing their names and doing things a little differently. So instead of just calling themselves something lame related to their local area, they call themselves the Yard Goats, or there's the Toledo Mud Hens and things like that. And they've started making it more fun, making it more mascot friendly, making it more unusual. There's a lot of Eagles, there's a lot of Chargers, there's a lot of Bobcats, there's a lot of Wildcats, there's a lot of the same kinds of things and mascots in sports, and they've decided to start doing things a little bit differently. But Savannah Bananas have taken it even farther, right? And that's what makes them so unusual, and that's what makes their team so valuable. But let's talk about that in terms of sports, because I think sports is another example where rarity, scarcity, is something that makes things valuable, right? With salt is great, and you need it, but it doesn't cost hundreds of thousands of dollars for a big piece of salt because you can get salt anywhere, but it can be millions of dollars for a big diamond because those are rare and very unusual and therefore valued in a different way. So that's what you want to do, is identify your uniqueness and look for opportunities to use it, identify ways to use it as a source of value. And I think understanding that is something that I think a lot of people miss, and it's a great explanation for a lot of things. So if you're into sports, one of the things that you'll know is that there's a lot of baseball games every year. There's 162 baseball games, but there's only 82 basketball games in a season, but there's only 17 now football games over 18 weeks. And so if you think about how excited people get and how much money they spend for a baseball playoff game or the World Series, it's a little different than what they pay for an NBA championship, but both of those are potentially 7-game series. And the value goes up and up and up until you get to the 7th game because it's rare and it's unusual and it's scarce and therefore it's valuable. But The Super Bowl is an even bigger ticket because there's only one of them. It's not a best of seven. There's one. And it only happens once a year. And there's only 17 football games during the season. And there's only a few playoff games. And if your team's really good, they skip the first round of the playoffs and go straight to the second round of the playoffs. And so one of the reasons that college football and professional football are so valuable, and I think are the two most valuable sports in American society, is because of scarcity, because of rarity. There's not that many chances, and I think I'm slipping a little bit into the second reason why being different is valuable. Is because of scarcity. And actually, I'm not. I'm still on the first one. So rare is scarce, and scarce is valuable. So rarity means it's not very common, and uncommon things are more valuable because we just value things that are less common. And you see that in football. In fact, in college football, from a home game standpoint, you have very few chances to see your college football team, your pro football team. And so you see teams like the Michigan Wolverines and the Tennessee Volunteers and things like that have some of the biggest stadiums in the United States, hold over 100,000 people, and they're sold out every single time because people know I've got 8 chances to see my team at home this year. I've got 6 chances to see my team at home this year, and then I won't be able to do it again. And so even in professional sports and in college sports, you see that people pay more attention to and therefore are willing to spend more money on something that is more rare. And the more common it becomes, 162 baseball games, you can miss a lot of baseball games and not really miss whatever's happening in the season. But if you miss one big college football game, when one or two losses can make a difference in the entire year, you've missed a lot. But you can miss a lot of NBA games, and even NBA players have sort of become famous now for not really caring that much about every single game because there's so many of them. But that's not the way football works, because they have to care more because every single game matters because there's less of them. Value comes from scarcity. And so when you can identify the way that you're rare, when you can identify the way that you're unusual, you can find a way to extract value from that, because you are valuable to the extent that you are unique and offer something that not a lot of other people offer. Um, there's been a lot of studies done about the fears that people have, and in a number of the studies, people cited that, number one is very often public speaking, and if it's not number one, it's always very high up there. People panic, people freak out. They say they're going to have heart attacks. They say they're going to have panic attacks. They say they're going to throw up. We have all sorts of fears around being embarrassed and making a mistake and being vulnerable and doing something wrong in front of a lot of people, and being on stage is terrifying for a lot of people. So I love to do, and I do for a living, something that most people would rather die than do. That is an incredibly valuable strength. And when I realized that, it enabled me to create a business around doing something that most people are actively trying to avoid. They're not just not seeking it, they're actively trying to avoid it. They're not sitting out there watching me saying, I wish that was me. A few people are, but most people aren't, because they don't want to do it because they're afraid of it. And even if they're not afraid of it, it's just something that a lot of people don't want to do. They don't want to be the center of attention. They don't want to be up front. They'd rather be behind the scenes or doing some other kind of activity. It's not even just about fear. It's about preference. And there's not that many people between the fears and the preferences who want to do what I do. And that enables me to be successful in a way that's very, very valuable for me. And then let's talk about that, because even that, as a professional speaker, I have to run my own business. I'm not an employee of anyone else's organization. And that's very rare as well. Only something between 13 and 15% of people in America will ever run their own business. And that means that running any kind of business in any way, and not being an employee is rare. And it also has the potential to be the most valuable. The wealthiest people in our society are not employees of organizations. They are the owners and founders of those organizations, or early employees that are founders and developers of an organization, got stock options and things like that. But they're involved in the creation of a business, and that's a very rare thing to do. And again, people say it's risky and it's scary, and it can be, but it also has the potential to be incredibly valuable. It has the highest risk potentially, and also the highest potential reward. And so it's safer oftentimes to be an employee, but it also doesn't have the upside that running a business does. And that's the other thing to understand. And we'll talk about this in a different episode when we talk about strength stacking. We talk about this in Pink Goldfish as well. We call it augmentation, is taking your uniqueness and stacking them on top of each other. So not just saying, I'm tall, I also run a business, I also enjoy professional speaking, I'm also pretty funny, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How do I put those things together? My top 5 strengths on the StrengthsFinder profile are achiever, activator, ideation, input, and command. I don't just try to say, how can I use my love of ideas to be successful? I say, how can I use my love of ideas to be successful? My love of learning new things, input, to be successful. Well, now I'm learning new ideas. Now I'm putting those two things together, but I'm also an achiever. So how can I learn new ideas about achievement? How can I use the new ideas that I've learned about achievement to activate not just myself, but other people, to encourage and promote success in others, to motivate and encourage other people? We talked last week about, do you have the courage? Are you courageous enough to do something crazy? One part of being an activator is that motivational speaker, that inspirational speaker. I used to be in leadership. My job was to get people going, get people moving, encourage you to achieve your goals. I posted the video from my podcast last week, a clip of it on TikTok, and talk about finding the right fit and finding situations that reward you for being who you are. And this one guy posts, oh yeah, it's easy, I'll just move and get a new job, right? What he was saying was, I don't want to do that. I don't think I'm going to do that. It's not easy to encourage people to do that. And I acknowledge the difficulty of it. I said, that's a great point. It's not easy, but it's worth it, right? It's not easy, but it's worth it. And also, I'm not telling people to do it. That's what I've done. I've been living in North Carolina for 21 years, and I grew up in Wisconsin, and I had to move cross country in order to do that. I was a college professor, and now I'm a professional speaker, and I had to change careers in order to do that. I've changed jobs. I've changed my work. I've changed my lifestyle. I've changed the location where I live multiple times throughout my life, and it's helped me to be as successful as I am. So I'm not saying that it's easy, but I am saying that it's worth it. So stacking that uniqueness, right? Stacking your strengths, not just looking at them in isolation, but if you don't understand what they are, you can't start stacking them. And then the last one is command. I like to be in charge. I like to be in control, which is why I like to run my own business. I don't like to be in charge of other people. I learned that in being a leader. I was good at it, but it wasn't my favorite. I want to be in charge of my own life. And so having my own business enables me to be in command of that. But also I can take command of a room as a professional speaker. And so I'm stacking all 5 of my biggest strengths in the work that I do. And that makes me even more unbeatable. That makes me more unstoppable. That makes me more rare, which makes me more valuable, because I'm taking unique strengths and then putting them together in a way that not a lot of other people do. And so that's the value of understanding yourself, not just understanding yourself, but understanding your uniqueness, answering that question, what makes you rare, even if it's as silly as the size of your finger and the size of your feet and how tall you are and how long your legs are. And again, I want to talk about that because that might sound like it doesn't matter. But again, the one thing that's helped me see is how weird I am and how many of the experiences I have aren't the same as they are for other people. and then have some empathy for the unique experiences that other people have, and not imagine that there's this big pile of ordinary people out there and then there's these couple of unique people out there. It's seeing that there's a tremendous amount of uniqueness within each individual. It's not just how tall are you and how much do you weigh, and are you married or are you single, and do you work or do you have your own business? The uniqueness just keeps going and going and going and going. There's educational level, there's activity level, there's interest level, there's personality, there's experience level, there's what you've learned and what you've done and who you have relationships with. And sooner or later, we all have something incredibly unique, but we don't tap into it oftentimes because we're either hiding it or we're not even aware of it in the first place. So that's today's episode. What makes you rare? Because what makes you rare is valuable, and being ordinary is not nearly as valuable because ordinary can be found anywhere, right? Ordinary can be found anywhere. You're looking for that uniqueness, and then you harvest, you mine the value of that uniqueness. Salt isn't worth as much as diamonds, even though salt is incredibly crucial, absolutely essential for life. But it's common, it's easy to find, it's easy to make, and so we don't value it as much. And let's even stick with salt, but we do pay more for sea salt. We pay more for organic sea salt. We pay more for Himalayan pink salt, and you know I love some Himalayan pink salt. Why? Because those are unique forms. There's not nearly as valuable as diamonds, but they're more valuable than common table salt because they're unique in some way. They're less common, they're more scarce, right? So abundance reduces value, scarcity increases value. So it's very valuable to know what makes you unique, what makes you different. And not, notice I didn't say if you're unique or if you're different. I said what makes you unique, what makes you different, because we're all unique and we're all different. And that's one that I encourage people all the time because I used to be a college professor, and it's a lot of people think it's normal to go to college, and it is kind of normal to go to college. Most people, I think something like 80% of people will graduate from high school and then go to college. But most of those people don't graduate. So something, I think right now it's only about 35% of Americans over the age of 25 have a college degree, which means you are unique, you are rare, and therefore there's value to you having that college education. And sometimes people say, why? Maybe the education itself doesn't feel as useful. That we're not even arguing that. It makes you more valuable in the sense that you have something that the majority of people don't have. So that's where the value comes in. But also, then people would say things to me like, should I get a master's degree? And what I would tell them was, well, only 8% or so, let's say 10 now maybe, of people get their master's degree. So that makes you even more unique and more rare. And then I ended up earning my doctorate, which is about 3% of people will ever earn a doctorate. And so that's another level of rarity, another level of exclusivity, another level of scarcity. Now, so there's value in those things. So when I tell people that, it's also to remind yourself the value of accomplishing something. Sometimes people think, oh, it's no big deal. Sure, I went to college. Everybody goes to college. No, everybody might go to college, but not everybody graduates from college. And so graduating from college is an accomplishment that you can feel proud of because you did something that most people don't do. Just like I said with the marathons and other things, you can feel proud of that. You can feel more confident by recognizing that you've done something that most people haven't done, which is something worth valuing, even if just for yourself, right? And we could argue, and certainly I have all sorts of problems with our educational system, and I don't think everybody does need to go to college. But doing it, the part of the value of it is the situation, the reality, which you can deny if you want to, that what is rare is more valuable. Now, Again, if you're not going to go to college, the one way to find value in that uniqueness is to start a business, which is very unique as well. And my oldest daughter had two different people in her class who didn't do very well in high school, did not enjoy school, did not go to college, and immediately started businesses, actually started businesses in high school that have become very successful. And so they are moving into, and we'll talk about this in a future episode, the importance of alignment, the importance of finding the right fit. Education isn't as important when you're running your own business because you don't need someone else to hire you and choose you as qualified. You can choose yourself. And you can prove on your own that you know how to do what needs to be done, and you can earn clients in different ways. And so that's an area where that person is very unique in the fact that they've started and run a successful business, even though they're not unique in the fact that they, for example, graduated from college. And so there's a lot of different ways to find uniqueness. There's not just one way. And so just saying graduating from college makes you unique and therefore that's valuable doesn't say that other things are less valuable or not unique. It's just a different kind of uniqueness. And so that's something to look for in all of your activities. Is learning this, doing this, finding this, exploring this going to make me more unique? Or are there a lot of people already doing this? Is everybody already moving in this direction? And certainly for businesses, doing something unique is valuable. As we talked about with the Savannah Bananas, they're doing something that literally no other minor league baseball team is doing, to the point that their team they play against, the Party Animals, is basically their team as well. They're just wearing different uniforms. So last week we asked the question, do you have the courage? Are you courageous enough to do something crazy? And we talked about the power of being different, specifically by doing the opposite of what everybody else is doing. So I thought we'd spend some time this week talking about the value of being different and why it's actually useful to be different. So being different makes you rare. Being normal makes you ordinary. I would argue that no one is normal anyway, but trying to focus on that normality or pretend you have that normality, or seeking out, trying to suppress your uniqueness in order to seek out that normality, is I think what a lot of people do. And I'm trying to encourage you to move in the opposite direction. What we'll talk about next week is that being different makes you original, and being normal makes you easy to imitate. And so next week, we'll talk about the value of being original instead of being easy to imitate. But that's a great Savannah Bananas example as well. They're original. There's not a lot of other people and teams trying to be like them. And now there might be, but the Harlem Globetrotters were original. And there weren't a lot of teams that tried to copy that. And so that's something that we'll talk about in a future episode as well. The beauty of being truly unique is, in a way that has sort of advantages and disadvantages, is not everyone's going to want to copy that because they're going to focus on the disadvantages. And the problems with being unique in that particular way. But next week, we'll talk about the value of being original and the problems with being easy to imitate. So this has been the Imperfectionist Podcast. My name is David Rendall. Thanks for joining me again this week. I'm heading out tonight to run a half marathon tomorrow with my oldest two daughters. And hopefully I'm in good enough shape to do that. I've been doing a lot of yard work and a lot of golfing, but I haven't been doing as much running. But we're going to do that. And then next week I head out to Oklahoma City to speak at a conference for people that are experts and professionals in the blood donation space. And so I'm speaking at that conference about the freak factor, about how our weaknesses are also strengths, and talking to them about how that affects their lives and their work. So I can't wait to do that. And I'll come back with some stories about Oklahoma City. So see you next week on the Imperfectionist Podcast. And in the meantime, be a party animal.